All right, g'day everyone. Welcome. It's really exciting seeing all the different mission pastors out there and churches that are keen to be on about mission. As Maddie said, my name's Dave. I'm actually the mission pastor for Hunter Bible Church in Newcastle, and that's a pretty new role in some sense for me. So I've just started taking the reins off a guy called Sam Hilton. Having said that, I've worked in mission stuff with him for about 7 or 8 years, and a big part of that has been running evangelistic courses, which, I love. So let me just start with a bit of a caveat. I want to say from the outset that, and you guys all know this, right? Evangelistic courses are not the silver bullet to evangelism. You can't just run a course and all of a sudden all the mission heat and energy around your church will explode. And there's actually lots to think into really broadly about how to help your church be on about evangelism. And so I would really recommend, there's another seminar that Reach Australia are running called, I think it's called Mission in the Church Ecosystem, which is run by Graham Fuller and Scott Sanders, and they're on tomorrow. So if you haven't registered for that, or you haven't been to the one a couple of weeks ago, I'd really recommend that because it helps you get that really broad picture of mission across your church. Having said that, we have found evangelistic courses really helpful. Firstly, in that they give a place for people to land. So as you talk about evangelism, as you encourage your church, your flock to be on about evangelism, having somewhere where they can actually bring someone to hear the gospel laid out really clearly. We found that to be actually really helpful, right? For people to actually engage in evangelism. And we've seen people become Christians through it by God's grace as well. So a couple of things that I'm going to run through in this session. I'm going to think through some principles as to think about as you run an evangelistic course. So really kind of broad brushstroke stuff. And then Dave's he's going to talk about how that's played out in his church context as they've tried to take some of that broad brush principles and apply it particularly in his church. And I will say just, it's worth knowing that we've been running evangelistic courses here at HBC for about 10 years now. So a lot of this stuff, it might seem like a lot of information, and I'm trying to, give you guys as much as we can, but it hasn't happened instantly. It's taken time and it's been resourced and added to along the way. If it feels like a lot of information, hopefully don't stress too much, just give it a crack and start where you can. And I will say too, I'm going to talk pretty generally, but I've actually attached a couple of docs in the Zoom chat there with some more detail, which will give you some more specific information about what to think into and some examples, I guess, of the things I'm going to talk about. So what I want to cover today really is some key things to consider in running an evangelistic course. And I want to talk about 3 don'ts and 1 do. 3 don'ts and 1 do. Realistically, the 3 don'ts are 3 mistakes that I've made as I've tried to run evangelistic courses. And so hopefully they'll help you not to make the same ones as well. And the first mistake that I've made is to assume that people will come. So that's the first don't. Don't assume that people will come. Now this seems really obvious on one level, right? But you can build an excellent evangelistic course that's really great at sharing the gospel, that people love coming to, that your church trusts and believes in, but never actually think about how you'll get people to rock up. And it's really important you do that because otherwise you've got this great course and no one's coming along to it. And again, part of how you get people to rock up, I think, is building a great culture of mission. So let me give another plug for that mission ecosystem seminar you're going to hear about. Really, I think as you think about how to get people along, it's worth thinking about how you'll advertise it, how you'll promote it to church, and how you promote it to both Christians at your church, but also non-Christians who might be sitting in your service on a Sunday, or they might be following your Facebook page, or however it is you actually engage with people. It's worth thinking about how people will know it's on, otherwise they won't come along. But it is more than just advertising. It's more than just promotion. One of the things we try to think about is how we will sell it, how we'll actually convince people to give up their Thursday night, their Wednesday morning, their Sunday afternoon, whenever it is, to go and hear about Jesus. And so one of the things we've been working on particularly is stories. We've found stories of people who have become Christians through your course are really powerful. They've been the most effective way that we can help our church buy into it and go, I want to bring my friend along to that. But also for the non-Christians sitting in your congregation, as they hear that story, it might resonate with them and they might be like, well, I want to check out this Jesus thing and see if he can have the same impact in my life as well. Now, that's hard to have a story when you haven't run a course before, no one's become a Christian through it. But over time, hopefully you can build up into that. So there's the kind of first one. Don't assume people will come, but think really hard about how you promote it to your church, how you promote it to different audiences through different mediums that you have, and how you actually sell it, how you more than just tell people it's on, how you convince them that this is something that is worth coming along to, it's worth giving up their time for. The second mistake I've made is to assume that people will keep coming. So this is the idea that you get people in through the door and then you think the hard work is done. Do you know what I mean? Like they've come once and you're like, oh great, they're just going to keep coming back. And some people are really committed to investigating Jesus and so they will keep coming back. But other people, it's a bit more of a struggle. They've got other competing priorities and things like that. And so you want to think about particularly the quality of the course you're running, both for the non-Christian who's coming along and for the Christian who has invited their friend and is bringing their friend along. And so there's a whole bunch of things you could think about at this point, right? So it's not just the quality of the gospel explanation or the content of the course, though that is really important. And you want to think about how you can have relevant, engaging, really good content and gospel explanation throughout your course. But it's everything. It's everything around that too. So you want to think through things like the number of weeks. What's a number of weeks that would be appropriate for you to run for an evangelistic course? The breakup of the nights. How are the nights leading people towards making a decision about Jesus across the weeks? Are the nights relevant? Are the talks relevant for people where they're at? We found it really helpful to think through the format of each night. So what is your run sheet and why is that your run sheet? Why have you got those different sessions, parts of your session there together? The vibe and aesthetics, so things like the lighting, the food, the tables and the chairs. This stuff really matters, right? This is really, really important for people continuing to come back again. And so, I mean, I can give you an example here. Let's say you've invited a friend along to this course that you're running for the first time. You've taken a risk, you've invited your friend along, and they come to the first night and they walk in and there's these just these plastic trestle tables set out. And then there's a hard, school plastic chair and a fluorescent light that's flickering above them and it's cold, there's no heating. And you can see what I mean, right? What does that communicate when people walk in? Well, it communicates this isn't that important. We haven't gone to that much effort. And people will read that implicitly. So the vibe of the night is really important there. If you want people to keep coming back and you want your church to trust the course that you're running and continue to bring them along. And so it's worth always remembering, we often talk about we're competing with the pub, we're competing with the TV, with Netflix, we're competing with, up here, the Newcastle Knights playing. And so you want to think about the quality, not just of your gospel explanation, definitely of your gospel explanation, but of everything that goes into the night to make it excellent, to make it really engaging and to keep people coming along. A couple of other things we think about which help people come along is thinking about what happens outside of the night. So is there stuff you can do throughout the week to encourage Christians who have brought a friend along and to keep the non-Christians thinking about what they've heard? Maybe that's a follow-up call after each night. Maybe it's an email that summarizes the night or something like that. But there are opportunities to engage with the people coming along and keep moving them forward in their investigation of Jesus beyond the night as well. So we use a document called Urca, which you'll be able to see in the chat, which helps our team who are running life have those really intentional conversations beyond the night itself throughout the week. And that really helps people keep coming back as well. So what I'm really saying here is you want to think about the user experience. As you get people to come along, you want to think about their experience of that night, both for the non-Christian and for the Christian who's been praying for their friend and has taken a risk to invite them along. And if you don't do those things, if you don't think about how to do those things well, it actually breaks trust. It breaks confidence in the church members, and so they won't invite people the next time. They won't encourage their friend to come back the next week. And obviously for those who are checking out Jesus, they won't come again. So a lot of information there, but one of the docs that has been shared with you is a document that I use when we're trying to train up leaders of our evangelistic courses called a Running an Evangelistic Course. And that goes through a lot of detail, like kind of step-by-step process of how to think through all those things which will keep people coming back. So there's the first two mistakes. You don't think about how you're going to get people to come along, and then you don't think about how everything throughout the session is actually helping people keep coming back to hear that life-saving news of Jesus. The third mistake I've made, and this is a really classic one, is you run an excellent course, you get people to come along, but you get to the end of the series and there's no clear next step for people. So the third mistake is don't forget to follow up well. And I think this kind of has two aspects. I've made this error in two really bad ways. The first is I've gotten to the end of the series and actually not invited people to become Christians, which sounds ridiculous, right? That is ridiculous when you think about it. But it's really important that as you're building a series, you are trying to lead people towards making a decision about Jesus. And so there has to be that moment in the series where you invite them to become Christians, and you encourage them to put their trust and their hope in Jesus and actually make that really explicit. But then there's also the question of what do you do with them next? So with the people who have decided to follow Jesus, with the people who have not decided to follow Jesus but are still interested, still have questions, still want to check him out, still keen to investigate if you like, how are you going to keep them moving forward in their walk with Jesus depending on where they're at by the end of the series? And so it's worth having some thought and some insight, some plan for where you are taking people after the series, so you don't get to the end of the series and then drop people and then go, what do we do next? Or you don't get to the end of the series and scramble, but you're actually thinking about how do we love people beyond this series? Because when you think about it, a series is just one aspect of this person coming to know and trust in Jesus. And there's a whole bunch of other steps along the way that'll help them become Christians, join a church family, persevere in Christ, and all those kind of things. So there's kind of three don'ts for running a mission structure, three mistakes I've made. One thing I will say, one do is do stick with it. Keep going, don't give up. It can really take time to build momentum. So one of the reflections I've had is, especially as I've had conversations with guys who have started mission courses and been running evangelistic courses for a while, is usually the first one or two times they run it, it's massive. It's huge and heaps of people come along. You know, they're really stoked about it. And then it gets harder in the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth series because the numbers don't seem to stay at the level they were in the first two series. And I think part of that is that there's a bunch of low-hanging fruit around your church, a bunch of people who don't know Jesus who are sitting around your church community often, who, when this series comes along, it's perfect for them. They've been waiting for something like this. And so those first series can be really big, but then it gets a little bit more difficult as that low-hanging fruit kind of comes along and moves through the course and all of that. it gets a bit more difficult to keep people coming along. But don't throw in the towel with it. Commit to a couple of years and for sure, reflect, assess, think about how things are going, think about how you can improve them and get more people along. But I will say, don't give up when it gets tough, because what we've found is that time and time and time again, as we've run an evangelistic course, we've seen it really help our church actually live out that if their evangelism with their friends, do evangelism with their friends as they bring them along and help them hear the gospel and all of those things. And by God's grace, people have been saved year after year after year as we've shared the gospel with them and Jesus has brought them to life.